Okay, this is the fourth and final lecture in the climate change module. And just kind of wrapping things up here. So we know, we've talked about this climate change, and it's related to changes in the ecology of the whole biosphere, and largely resulting from rising in the concentration of carbon dioxide and other gases like methane, nitrous oxide. These things are becoming more prevalent in our atmosphere, right, and causing changes to our climate. And we've talked about what climate is, and we've talked some about the implications of these changes. When you change climate, how does that change ecology? How does that change the distribution and abundance of plants and animals? It's important to make a point here. You'll hear in popular reports that there is some controversy about whether or not humans are involved with this, and that's maybe true among the public, but if you look at scientists, there is no controversy. Overarching conclusion of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change in both 2014 and 19. Again, this is groups of scientists from all different countries, all different types of governments, and they all agree that humans are causing climate change. So when people say that there is some controversy, that's just more among lay people, non-scientists, and particularly politicians. So greenhouse gases include carbon dioxide, but also includes things like water vapor, methane. These are the specific physical properties of these gases make it such that solar radiation can pass through them on the way into the atmosphere. The Earth absorbs the radiation and reflects heat, and those greenhouse gases trap that heat close to the Earth rather than allowing that heat to radiate back out into the outer space. Okay, and so that is called the greenhouse effect, and that's not really controversial. The fact that we can exist here on Earth and the Earth is habitable to life is because of the climate caused by the greenhouse effect. Right? I mean, we see that in a greenhouse. Right? It's the same basic principle. We see that in astronomy. You look at a given planet, and I don't know if you guys kind of follow this idea of exoplanets and the search for extraterrestrial life, and these planets that are being discovered outside of our solar system that are potentially supportive of life. But that's the way that they figure out whether, one of the ways they figure out whether a planet can support life is by looking at the physical properties of the atmosphere for that planet, and that will tell scientists a lot about the temperature in the planet. Right? So this, again, we've talked about this. Mars has a thin, Venus has a thick atmosphere. Earth is kind of like the Goldilocks, right in the middle, just right amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and therefore directly related to that is the temperature on Earth, which allows us to have liquid water, not gaseous water, and not ice. Okay, so how's this evident that the climate is changing? And probably the most obvious, or here signature effect of rapidly increasing gases is a concurrent and correlated increase in average global temperature. Okay? 1.4 degrees Fahrenheit over the last 100 years. Okay? And not only is the temperature increasing, but the rate at which the temperature is increasing. Okay? So, i.e., there's an increase, and that increase is getting faster and faster. 75% of those 1.4 degrees Fahrenheit has happened in the last 30 years. It's very likely, if not just guaranteed, that by the end of the century, the temperature is going to continue to increase, and accompanying that will be changes in sea level, and that's related to water that is on the land in large ice sheets and glaciers melting and flowing into the ocean. And somebody asked on Tuesday, which is a good and fair question. I'm glad that you guys feel comfortable to ask questions, but the question being, is that a problem that the sea level is rising? And so let's see if I can pull this up. And this is very predictable. If the sea level rises, it's very predictable what the implications will be. Because you can just look at a map and look at, however many feet or meters above sea level the different cities or population centers are, and as a result, what will be affected by a given rise in the sea level. Internet is very, very slow. And it is definitely very striking to look and see how sea level rise could affect us. This is from The Guardian, which is a popular newspaper in England. And let's see if I can switch over to the mobile hotspot here. Samsung, right. I'll come back to that. Yeah, and so it's important to realize that even if we stop producing any of these extra greenhouse gases right now, there still is going to be increases. That is a guarantee, right? And so really, because there's a lag, it's not a cow farts today and the temperature goes up that minute. There's always a lag between these things. Let's see. Asian cities, right? If you look at how humans are sort of distributed on the Earth, we know that a lot of population centers are right near the ocean. Osaka is in Japan, flown in there before, and you'd see basically a large portion of all the roads, very dense city, lots and lots of millions of people live there. Alright, boom. The entire city pretty much be underwater. Alexandria, Egypt. The Nile River is the Mediterranean Sea, so this is North Africa, Europe this way. Right, pretty much, again, the entire city underwater at 3 degrees Celsius change. Rio de Janeiro, and Brazil. And so on and so forth. Shanghai, China. This is just mind-boggling. This is a huge city. Millions of people live in this city. It's right on the Yellow Sea. The whole city, Miami, boom, totally underwater. So yes, where are all these people gonna go? Right? It's gonna be a huge, huge issue. Right? And there's a lot of places actually we're seeing this happen. A lot of these small island nations in the South Pacific, that the entire nation may be less than 2 meters above sea level, and they're already seeing a lot of issues from rising sea level. And the United States too, by the way. So, vast majority of scientists very important point, are confident, not 100% sure. Remember, that's not how science works. Science is not talking sureties. It's not deterministic, it's probabilistic. Scientists say there's a certain probability that humans are causing this, right? Nothing is proven. Just the evidence all supports this idea that things like agriculture, landfills, burning of wood and fossil fuels are contributing emissions to the atmosphere, and those greenhouse gases are causing rise in temperature. Okay? It's very clear, folks. It's not a conspiracy. Okay? Carbon cycle. There are things that take carbon out of the atmosphere and lock it into plants, lock it into algae, right? That is basically photosynthesis, right? CO2 into sugar. Sugars include cellulose, include lignin, right? A wood pencil, a wood chair, table, desk, paper, all those things are made out of what used to be atmospheric greenhouse gases. So the more photosynthesis we have, the less carbon dioxide we have in the atmosphere. But the problem is we're cutting down the forests, right? We're cutting down the forest, and instead of having forest there, we're putting in things like cows, right? And cows, on the other hand, eat the grass, and they digest the sugar, and what's the byproduct of respiration is CO2, okay? We are digging up oils, digging up coal, we're fracking natural gas out of the earth, we're burning it in our cars, we're burning it in our factories, we're burning it in our power plants, and those things go back to the atmosphere, okay? So again, we see this balance between photosynthesis, absorbing carbon dioxide and making it into sugar, respiration, taking that sugar and burning it to get the energy and making carbon dioxide. There's this global balance, equilibrium between these things. It's causing major differences, changes in these biomes. Okay? We're seeing shifts in the boundaries of these different biomes because we said where these biomes are found is largely determined by temperature and by humidity, rainfall, and which those things are affected by temperature. Okay? So, process of science. Scientists are studying this phenomenon and can make observations, right? The temperature is increasing. And we know that butterflies are very sensitive to changes in temperature, so the question arises, would you expect the range or the distribution or the areas where these butterflies are found to be changing in response to climate change? Okay, so you come up with a hypothesis, which is an answer to the question, which is the best answer that we can come up with at the beginning, right? And that is the butterfly distributions are shifting. And you can make predictions. If butterfly distributions are shifting, what do you expect to see? Right? The butterfly species will establish new populations in the northern part of the range, and that populations at the southern end of the range will become extinct. Right? And so then you collect data. Why butterflies? Well, people fancy butterflies in Europe. Even people that are not professional scientists have been going for decades, really centuries, to study butterflies. And just as our prediction would say, that the orange here, this species of butterfly was found in the southern part of Finland and Sweden in 1970, but in 1997 Many of the populations in the southern part of the range have gone extinct, and new populations in the north have become established. So yes, the ranges of these populations are changing, right, in response to increasing temperature. And that's fine for a butterfly. Butterflies can fly. It's relatively easy to what we call disperse, right? So some organisms have relatively low dispersal abilities. This picture here is by Plethodon jordani, or shermani, the red-legged salamander, which lives in North Georgia and North Carolina. And this species is dependent on cool and moist forests, and those forests really occur in the high parts of mountains at this point. So the question is, well, I don't think it's, yeah, I mean it is a question because we don't really know the answer, is what's going to happen to these animals, right? If the animal can only survive at the top of the mountain where it's cool, and as the temperature increases they can't go any higher in the mountain because the mountain's just as high as it's going to be. And they can't go north because to get north they'd have to go down the side of the mountain where it's warmer and warmer and warmer, and then cross a valley and climb up the other side of the mountain. That's just simply not going to happen. What about things that live in polar regions? Again, there is no colder place for these species to go, and we expect a lot of these species to go extinct. There's just no way around it. Very sad and unfortunate. So we can see, again, these biomes, here's some given ecosystems, biomes. Alright, then these are the names of them. Woodland, steppe, scrub, forest, tundra, deserts. Okay? Those are caused by changes, or really, the distribution of those ecosystems are determined by temperature and rainfall. If the temperature increases by 3 degrees C and the precipitation increases by 10%, then we can predict that some of these ecosystems will increase in their distribution. Some of them will go higher. Some of them are going to get smaller, like the polar desert will become relatively small. And in fact, some of these environments, such as the subalpine montane scrub, are expected to totally disappear. And it's important to realize that there are types of plants and animals that are found nowhere except in that specific type of environment. So when the habitat disappears, there goes the species too. Okay. And who knows? We talked about the values of biodiversity earlier in the class. We talked about the aesthetic values, but also the economic values. We talked about all the potential, pharmaceuticals and recreational and otherwise drugs that could be found among these plants. We talked about the genes that are in these plants that could be used to breed into our agricultural plants, right? This is a big deal. These species found in these different environments have a value, okay? And as they disappear, we lose that value. Okay? Plants and animals, very tightly queued together. Life cycle events. When germination happens, when flowering happens, when seed production happens, right? Animal life cycle, when you emerge from overwintering, when you feed, when you lay eggs. Therefore, once you lay eggs, how much pollen do you need? All these events are timed by warming temperature. Okay? Other species, the cue is not the temperature, but the day length. Right? And we've seen this in the last lecture. The day length is not going to be affected by carbon dioxide and water vapor. Okay, that's not going to change. But with a changing temperature, we see that some interactions between plants and animals will become out of sync, right? And so this is, again, almost none of this stuff is theoretical that may happen in the future. These are things we're seeing happening now, and that the implications will only increase. And so we're at the end of this class, folks. I'm going to encourage you guys to just keep paying attention and to read and watch the news, and to use what you've learned in this class as a foothold and a foundation, and just to continue to increase your knowledge. Okay? Wildfires. As you change precipitation, humidity, temperature, right? These things are driving a lot of these extreme weather events and things like wildfires. Last year was a terrible year for wildfires. Huge swaths of Australia burned, even up into the Arctic part of the Earth. And guess what? It's kind of a feedback loop. As these trees burn, guess what is in the smoke? Lots and lots of carbon dioxide. A lot of things that were locked up in these trees are now being sent back up into the atmosphere. Okay? So it's not just koala bears, right? Temperature, humidity, rainfall affect where food is produced, how much food is produced. It affects things like whether rivers have enough water in them for Atlanta, droughts, things like that. But down to these extreme weather events, increased intensity of hurricanes, increased rainfall. These things wear on buildings and roads, and costing trillions of dollars in infrastructural costs. Already we're seeing this. So, our next topic here in this lecture is, what can we do about this? How much is it going to cost? Well, we're not going to really get into that, but it will be costly to deal with climate change. But it's important to realize that it's going to be more costly if we don't deal with it. Okay? If we don't deal with it, we can expect just more and more issues, including these bullet points here. Okay, so question comes up, well, what can we do about this? And had good discussion on Tuesday. Looking forward to talking to you guys tomorrow too about what can we really do about this, and why are we not doing more. But I'm just giving you guys some conceptual framework to kind of think about this issue. It is an issue, right? We think about issues. We think about social justice issues. We think about public health issues. We think about these issues, and I'm hopeful that the climate change does not get taken off the plate, right? And so we think about this in terms of your carbon, what's called a carbon footprint, okay? Because this is what's saying is, based on your day-to-day activities, how many greenhouse gases are being emitted into the atmosphere because of your choices. Okay, and so there are things that you can do that can reduce your carbon footprint. One is, of course, reducing energy consumption. These are things we've been talking about for so freaking long. Shutting off lights, using energy efficient appliances, using LED lights instead of traditional light bulbs. Having a smaller home that doesn't require so much heat or air. using more insulation in a home. Right? These are all things that can drive your energy consumption down. Driving less. Picking a car that's more efficient. Okay, recycling. It is a little. I'm just going to say it's easy to get discouraged when I see that recycling. I mean, you can't even recycle hardly on campus anymore. Right? I feel like we're going the wrong direction here. But one of the biggest things you can do, and I think this is a relatively simple thing, and it just makes a lot of sense in more than just one ways, and that's your diet, right? One of the biggest producers of greenhouse gases is cattle. Okay, so we'll see cattle is very inefficient production method. So if you want to grow beef, then you feed that cow either grains or you feed that cow grass. Okay, and then the cow eats, digests, absorbs those plants, and then it builds new protein muscles, i.e. beef, with those plants. The issue is cows are very inefficient at converting grass into hamburgers. Okay, they are very inefficient. The bacteria that are found in their stomach, and then also the manure that they produce, and that gets decomposed, produces a lot of methane. Right? So eating just about anything is better for the earth than eating cows. Right? Chicken is better for the environment. Turns out it's better for you too. It's better for your cholesterol, it's better for your colon. Right? Even pigs are not as bad as cows. But the best really is eating plants. Okay? And I know this is kind of a stigma here in the United States. Right? People don't want to be construed as some kind of hippie. But, I mean, honestly, guys, just give it a shot. There's some really delicious fruits and veggies out there that you can eat. Much better for you, for your weight. They're better. And a lot of people, I think, are catching on to this. Is that, you know, and again, we don't have to go to extremes here. Drop one meal, drop beef out of 1 or 2 meals a week, and I don't think you're going to really notice it much, and you can have a pretty big impact. So here we have all of the major contributors to greenhouse gases. Energy production. So again, that's energy consumption. So this is things like a lot of our electricity comes from burning coal, and there's a whole set of real big issues with coal production. I invite you to just sit down after you finish this, look up mountaintop removal. I think you'll be pretty surprised at how dramatic that is. Right, is this thing even recording? Where the hell is the... Sorry. So yeah, energy production is an issue. Coal mining, mountaintop removal is an issue. We're blowing off the tops of mountains in very biodiverse areas of the Cumberland Plateau, trucking it down to Georgia, burning it, producing electricity. So we see that here's the surprising thing: 18% of emissions come from livestock production. So basically, producing meat. And so where does that come in? The little cow graph over here shows that, number one, cows just fart a lot. So as they ferment the grasses and corns that they eat, plants are very difficult to digest. As they digest those things, the bacteria in their guts that break it down produce lots of methane. The feed that they eat requires a lot of fertilizer and just general farm production. This is gas in the tractors. This is pesticides. This is storage, heating and air. But also the actual, so as we cut down the feed crops and we remove those, we're removing basically what's called a sink, that we're removing not a source of carbon dioxide, but a place where carbon dioxide is absorbed from the atmosphere. So we're taking these photosynthetic plants that are taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, and we're cutting them down and removing them, right? So that reduces absorption of greenhouse gases. Okay, and so if on the other hand, if in the same space that we were growing all these food crops and all the fertilizer that we were putting on them and all the production costs, if we had just been growing plants to eat, right, you would have saved a lot of greenhouse gases. Okay, so this is something I hear from people say, well, organisms can adapt or die, right? Climate changes, they can adapt to the changing climate or they can die. Extinction is a natural process, and it's just something we can expect. So why is it necessarily so bad? And indeed, we have seen some microevolutionary changes. These are basically changes in gene frequencies that they at least suggest that these organisms are becoming adapted to changes of their environment. Red squirrels, some birds, tiny mosquitoes. But the problem is that a lot of organisms, right, are just not going to have the time or the genetic variability to adapt. Right? Evolutionary adaptation is unlikely to save long-lived species with low numbers. So let's revisit adaptation. Let's revisit this idea of natural selection and adaptation, evolution. On the top, we have genetically determined trait. Say this is heat tolerance, and the darker the circle, the more tolerant they are to heat. Okay, so why in the next generation do we have 3 different colors? Well, those are mutations. So the genetics of the original population mutates by simple mistakes when DNA is being copied during the S phase of mitosis. We get these multiple different versions of the same gene. Now, this version is not a good version. It actually makes the population less heat tolerant. So what's going to happen to that gene? Well, the organisms containing that gene is they either die before they reproduce, or they never get the chance to reproduce, effectively a dead end. Okay, this version does okay, right? They do pass on their genes, and then here they pass on their genes twice, but then boom, those 2 individuals are dead, and so that version of this gene does not make it to the present day. Now, this one is pretty favorable, mutates again to even more heat tolerant, and that heat tolerant version of the gene is more likely to reproduce and survive than any other version. And so over time, basically what we see is we go from a darkish brown to a very dark brown, right? Because of mutations and differential survival and reproduction. Okay, now that's cool when we're talking about something like a bacteria, because from here to there is maybe a day, and then another day, and 3, 4, 5 days. Right? We can have a change because a generation in bacteria is pretty short. But when you're talking about things like a polar bear, right, those organisms have a generation time of maybe 15 to 20 to 30 years in some cases, right? So 15, 30, 45, 60, 75 years, right? We're talking about, it's just, there's not enough organisms to have mutations, and they do not reproduce quickly enough to really be able to keep up with the pace of the change in the climate. Really, the rate at which the climate is changing. And as we talked about in the climate change case study, that's really the biggest alarm bell, is not the magnitude of the change, but the rate at which the climate is changing. It's incredibly fast, and shifts in evolutionary history are just not able to keep up. Okay, up to 30% of all plants and animals will face extinction by mid-century. And yeah, I mean, I think it's, the writing is on the wall, folks. So you know, again, keep paying attention. If you really are genuine about wanting to contribute to this, right, then you can vote at the ballot box. You can vote for politicians who acknowledge the reality of climate change. They have a plan for how we can change our systems, for how we change our the way that we use energy. They have a way to plan for the changes, right, in a way that is going to increase our securities. We can vote with our wallets too, right? There are certain companies that are trying to be very efficient with their energy usage. There are companies that are shooting to be carbon neutral by a certain year. So those companies, basically, every company is going to use some energy, right? They're going to use energy, and that energy is going to cost something in terms of greenhouse emissions. But maybe they are shooting to use more and more solar power rather than burning coal. Maybe they're shooting to use more hydroelectric. And then to offset the carbon that they do use, right, they can go and plant trees to absorb some carbon dioxide. Basically an equivalent amount of carbon dioxide that they're contributing can be taken up by plants, right? So these are the kind of companies that we want to support with our money. We want to incentivize. We want to reward those companies for doing the right thing, right? And so, you know, these are just a few of the small things that you can do in order to make a difference here. Again, it's not an after-school special, but this is serious stuff. So let's see. I think that's it. That's it, folks. The last lecture. And so I appreciate you guys. I really enjoyed getting to know a lot of you guys during the semester. I hope that we keep in touch. You know, it always warms my heart. You email me after the class is done, not because you're expecting to get extra credit, but just because you're interested in something. If you see a news story that makes you think of something you learned in the class, send me an email. Stop by and see me. You know where my office is. Just keep on learning.